The impossible breach. The forbidden sector. Captain Alina Voss pressed her palm against the cold metal of the observation deck window, watching the swirling colors of the Nexus barrier stretch endlessly before them. For 500 years, this magnificent wall of energy had stood as the ultimate boundary in known space. No ship had ever passed through it. No weapon had ever scratched it. No civilization had ever challenged it, and lived to tell the tale. The horizon's edge floated silently in the void, its crew of 47 humans staring at what the galaxy considered impossible to breach. The ship itself was nothing special by galactic standards. A mid-range exploration vessel with standard human technology that most advanced civilizations would consider primitive. But Alina knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't understand about humans. They had never met a wall they wouldn't try to climb. The Nexus barrier shimmered like liquid starlight, stretching across 3 entire solar systems. Behind it lay the galactic core, home to the most advanced civilizations in known space. The Architects, the Veil Lords, the Crystal Collective. Species so advanced, they were considered gods by younger races. They had built this barrier centuries ago, claiming it was necessary to protect the galaxy from threats beyond comprehension. What they really meant was protection from species like humanity. Young, unpredictable, and dangerously curious. Alina turned from the window as her first officer approached. Commander Jake Morrison was built like the soldier he used to be, with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing. He had served with Alina for 6 years, following her from military service into deep space exploration. If anyone understood her crazy ideas, it was Jake. "The long-range sensors are picking up something interesting," Jake said, handing her a datapad. "Energy signatures beyond the barrier that don't match anything in our databases. Whatever's back there, it's not just the usual civilizations we know about." Alina studied the readings, her heart racing with the familiar thrill of discovery. The patterns were unlike anything human science had encountered. Complex, shifting, almost alive in their movement. Every instinct told her this was important, possibly the most significant discovery in human history. The discovery. Dr. Marcus Chen hurried into the observation deck, his usually neat hair disheveled from hours bent over his instruments. As the ship's chief science officer, Marcus had spent the last 3 days analyzing the mysterious signals coming from beyond the barrier. His excitement was barely contained as he spread his findings across the central display table. "Captain, you need to see this," Marcus said, his voice trembling with barely controlled excitement. "These aren't just random energy patterns. They're structured, organized, purposeful. Someone or something is trying to communicate, and they're using quantum frequencies we've never seen before." Alina leaned over the display, watching the cascading streams of data flow across the screen. The patterns pulsed and shifted, forming complex geometric shapes that seemed to follow mathematical principles far beyond current human understanding. Yet there was something familiar about them, something that spoke to the pattern recognition abilities that had helped humans survive and thrive throughout their history. "How long have they been transmitting?" Alina asked. "That's the incredible part," Marcus replied, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Based on the quantum decay signatures, these signals have been broadcasting for over 1,000 years. Someone has been trying to reach out, to make contact, but the barrier has been blocking all communication." Jake frowned, his military instincts kicking in. "Or someone's been deliberately keeping us from hearing these signals. The question is why." Alina studied the data more carefully, her mind racing through possibilities. The implications were staggering. If there were civilizations beyond the barrier trying to communicate, then the supposedly protective Nexus barrier might actually be a prison, keeping the galaxy's younger races isolated and controlled. She made a decision that would change everything. "Marcus, I want you to work with engineering to modify our communication array. If someone's been trying to talk for 1,000 years, it's time we answered." First contact gone wrong. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Marcus successfully modifying their communication systems, the Horizon's Edge received its first direct transmission from beyond the barrier. The message was brief but clear, translated through quantum linguistic matrices that human computers barely understood. Unknown vessel, you have breached communication protocols. Withdraw immediately or face consequences. Elena stood in the ship's communications center, surrounded by her senior staff. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, their communications officer, worked frantically at her console, trying to establish a clearer connection with whoever had sent the message. "Captain," Sarah said, sweat beading on her forehead, "I'm detecting massive power signatures beyond the barrier. Ships, lots of them, and they're moving this way." The main screen flickered to life, showing a sight that took everyone's breath away. Emerging from the swirling energy of the Nexus barrier came vessels unlike anything in human experience. They were sleek, organic-looking craft that seemed to bend light around them, creating rippling distortions in space itself. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of the Horizon's Edge, and there were dozens of them. Elena stepped forward, straightening her uniform. "Open a channel. Let's try diplomacy first." The alien response was immediate and harsh. A figure appeared on screen, tall, elegant, with features that seemed carved from living crystal. Its eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of intelligence far beyond human comprehension. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Executor Zethran of the Galactic Preservation Fleet. You represent the species humans, a Classification 7 primitive civilization. Your presence in this sector violates the containment protocols established for your own protection. You will return to your designated territory immediately." Elena felt her temper rise at the condescending tone, but she kept her voice level. "I'm Captain Elena Voss of the human exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. We've detected communication signals from beyond the barrier and came to investigate. We're here in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship." Zethran's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Friendship is not possible between your species and the galactic core civilizations. You lack the evolutionary development necessary for meaningful contact. The barrier exists to protect both you and us from the consequences of premature interaction." "Protect us from what?" Elena demanded, her diplomatic patience wearing thin. "From yourselves," Zethran replied coldly. "Your species has demonstrated a consistent pattern of violence, unpredictability, and dangerous curiosity. The containment protocols were established after careful study of your behavioral patterns. You are not ready for the responsibilities that come with advanced galactic citizenship." Jake stepped up beside Elena, his hand resting on his sidearm. "And who made you the judge of that?" Zethran's glowing eyes fixed on Jake with something that might have been amusement. "We who have guided the galaxy's development for millennia. We who have seen species like yours rise and fall. We who understand the consequences of allowing primitive civilizations access to technologies beyond their wisdom to control." The conversation continued for another hour, but it became clear that diplomacy was failing. The aliens saw humans as children playing with dangerous toys, too primitive to understand the larger galactic community. Elena found herself growing more frustrated with each passing minute, not just at their condescension, but at their refusal to even consider that humanity might have something to offer. The breakthrough. As the diplomatic talk stalled, Elena made a decision that would shock the galaxy. She turned to Marcus and whispered, "How long would it take to analyze the barrier's energy signature?" Marcus looked startled. "Captain, you're not thinking of." "How long?" Elena insisted. "Maybe 6 hours if we push the sensors to maximum resolution," Marcus replied, understanding dawning in his eyes. Elena nodded and returned her attention to Executor Zethran. "We understand your position, but we can't simply turn around and pretend we never detected those signals. Give us 24 hours to prepare for departure." Zethran considered this, his crystalline features reflecting the light of distant stars. "You have 12 hours. After that, We will escort you back to your territory by force if necessary." The transmission ended, leaving the crew of the Horizon's Edge in tense silence. Alina looked around at her officers. Jake with his determined expression, Marcus practically vibrating with scientific curiosity, Sarah already working on sensor modifications, and the dozen other crew members who had followed her into the unknown. "You all know what I'm thinking," Alina said quietly. "The question is, are you with me?" The response was immediate and unanimous. These were humans who had volunteered for deep space exploration, who had left the safety of Earth to push the boundaries of human knowledge. They weren't about to be turned away by alien superiority complexes. For the next 6 hours, the crew worked with desperate efficiency. Marcus and the engineering team, led by Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez, performed miracles of improvisation and ingenuity. They rerouted power systems, modified sensor arrays, and jerry-rigged equipment in ways that would have horrified safety inspectors, but perfectly embody human adaptability. The breakthrough came when Marcus realized that the barrier wasn't actually a solid wall of energy. It was a complex interference pattern, like standing waves on the surface of a pond. The aliens had created it by generating precisely coordinated energy fields from massive installations scattered around the core systems. It was incredibly sophisticated, but it had one weakness that its creators never considered. It was designed to repel brute force, not subtle infiltration. "It's like trying to keep mosquitoes out with a hurricane," Marcus explained excitedly to Alina. "The barrier is so powerful that it can't distinguish between major threats and minor fluctuations. If we can match the quantum frequency of local spacetime and approach at exactly the right angle, we might be able to slip through the gaps in their interference pattern." Alina studied the complex calculations covering every screen in the science lab. "Might. 73% chance of success," Marcus admitted. 17% chance we get vaporized instantly. 10% chance we end up scattered across several dimensions. Jake whistled low. "I've had worse odds." The impossible happens. The attempt began at the 6-hour mark, while the alien fleet maintained their watchful distance. Alina had the entire crew at battle stations, not because they expected to fight, but because what they were attempting required perfect coordination from every department. Rosa's engineering team had pushed the ship's systems far beyond their design specifications. The quantum tunneling array, cobbled together from spare parts and sheer human stubbornness, hummed with barely contained energy. Navigation Officer Lieutenant Tom Bradley worked with mathematical precision that would have impressed computers, calculating approach vectors down to the millimeter. "Approaching the barrier interface," Tom announced, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Quantum field synchronization at 92% and climbing." Alina watched the swirling wall of energy grow larger on the main screen. At this distance, she could see the incredible complexity of the barrier. Layers upon layers of interwoven energy fields creating patterns of mind-bending beauty. The aliens had built something truly magnificent, and humanity was about to prove it wasn't perfect. "Synchronization achieved," Marcus called out. "Field resonance is stable. Captain, we're as ready as we'll ever be." Alina took a deep breath, thinking about all the human explorers who had faced impossible odds throughout history. From the first humans who decided to cross vast oceans to the ones who reached for the stars, her species had always found a way to break through barriers that others considered absolute. "Take us through," she ordered. What happened next defied every law of physics the galaxy thought it understood. The Horizon's Edge didn't crash into the barrier or get destroyed by its immense energies. Instead, the ship seemed to become incorporeal, its quantum signature matching the barrier's frequencies so perfectly that the massive defensive system couldn't detect it. Like a ghost walking through walls, the human vessels slipped through gaps in reality itself. For one terrifying moment, Alina felt as if she were everywhere and nowhere at once. The ship existed in several dimensions simultaneously, and she could see/feel/experience layers of reality that human senses weren't designed to process. Then, with a sensation like breaking through the surface of a deep pool, they emerged on the other side. The galactic core spread before them in all its magnificent glory. Thousands of star systems connected by streams of controlled energy, artificial constructs the size of planets, and technologies that turned science fiction into reality. But what caught Elena's attention immediately was something the aliens hadn't mentioned. Massive fleets of warships engaged in desperate battles against something dark and terrible that seemed to devour light itself. Immediate consequences. The moment the horizon's edge materialized beyond the barrier, every advanced civilization in the galactic core detected the breach. Emergency signals flashed across thousand-year-old communication networks. Ancient AIs that had been dormant for centuries suddenly activated. The impossible had happened. A primitive species had broken through the Nexus barrier. Executor Zethran's reaction was immediate and furious. His fleet, which had been maintaining a careful distance from the barrier, suddenly accelerated to pursuit speed. But they faced the same problem that had kept them from simply destroying the human ship earlier. Their own barrier prevented them from following quickly. How? Zethran's voice echoed through the command center of his flagship, the crystalline surfaces of the walls resonating with his anger and disbelief. How did a Classification 7 species reach a barrier that has held for 5 centuries? His science officer, a being of pure energy that flickered with nervous patterns, provided the analysis. They didn't break through it, Executor. They somehow synchronized with it, treated it as a natural phenomenon rather than an obstacle. The approach shows understanding of quantum mechanics we didn't know they possessed. Meanwhile, across the galactic core, the news spread with the speed of quantum entanglement. The Crystal Collective's vast computer networks processed the implications in nanoseconds. The Veil Lord's shadow fleets emerged from hidden dimensions to investigate. The architects paused in their millennia-long construction projects to focus their ancient attention on this unprecedented event. On the human ship, Elena was trying to process what they had accomplished while dealing with the immediate reality of their situation. They had broken through the galaxy's most powerful defense system, but they were now alone in territory controlled by civilizations that considered them dangerous primitives. Captain, Sarah's voice was tight with barely controlled excitement and fear. We're receiving communications from multiple sources. I count at least 30 different alien civilizations trying to contact us simultaneously. Belina looked at the tactical display, showing the positions of various fleets converging on their location. Some were clearly military vessels, their weapon signatures unmistakable even to human sensors. Others were more mysterious. Ships that bent space around them, energy beings that existed without physical form, artificial intelligences housed in spacecraft larger than Earth's moon. Can you filter the communications? Find someone who doesn't sound like they want to vaporize us immediately. Sarah worked frantically at her console, sorting through the flood of alien languages, mathematical equations, and forms of communication that human science barely recognized. Captain, there's one message that's different from the others. It's coming from a ship that's maintaining distance from the military fleets. The translation protocols are strange, but I think they're asking for permission to approach. Elena made another decision that would reshape galactic politics. Grant permission, but keep our shields up and be ready to run if this goes badly. The ship that approached was unlike anything they had seen so far. Where the other alien vessels were clearly products of advanced technology, this one seemed almost organic, its hull covered in patterns that shifted and flowed like living skin. It was smaller than the military vessels, but radiated a sense of ancient wisdom that made even the most advanced alien technology seem young by comparison. The being that appeared on their communication screen was equally unique. It stood upright like a human but was clearly not mammalian. Its skin had the texture of polished wood, and its eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of accumulated experience. I am Ambassador Kythera of the Gardner Collective, the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies humans could barely hear. We have watched your species with great interest, despite the restrictions placed upon us by the preservation protocols. Your achievement today has demonstrated something we have long suspected, that the classification system used by the core civilizations may be fundamentally flawed. Elena felt a surge of hope. Finally, an alien who didn't sound like they were talking to a particularly bright animal. Ambassador, I'm Captain Elena Voss. We came here in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship. We mean no harm to anyone. Kythera's expression, somehow readable despite the alien features, showed something that might have been approval. We believe you, Captain Voss, but you must understand the magnitude of what you have accomplished. The Nexus barrier was considered absolute by civilizations far older and more advanced than my own. By breaching it, you have not only challenged the authority of the core species, but you have also exposed them to scrutiny they have avoided for centuries. What do you mean? Elena asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. The barrier was not built solely to contain younger species, Kythera replied gravely. It was also built to hide the fact that the supposedly superior core civilizations have been fighting a losing war against something they cannot understand or defeat, something that your species, with your unique approach to problem solving, might actually be able to help them face. As if summoned by Kythera's words, alerts began sounding throughout the horizon's edge. On the long-range sensors, massive shapes were moving in the depths of space beyond the core systems, things that absorbed light and energy, leaving trails of absolute darkness in their wake. The real enemy that the Nexus barrier had been built to contain was stirring, drawn by the energy signature of the barrier breach. Elena realized that humanity had just walked into the middle of a galactic war that had been hidden from the younger species for centuries. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt the familiar human response to impossible odds. Determination to prove that there was no problem that couldn't be solved with enough creativity, courage, and stubborn refusal to give up. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they said, "Challenge accepted." The galaxy changes forever. The Galactic Council's emergency session. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Core had not seen such chaos in over 3 centuries. Representatives from 47 different civilizations filled the massive chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and quantum fluctuations that would have overwhelmed human senses. At the center of the great crystalline amphitheater, the Emergency Council convened to address the crisis that no one had thought possible. Executor Zethrin stood before the assembled delegates, his crystalline form reflecting the anger and confusion that rippled through the chamber. The holographic displays around him showed the impossible sight. The human vessel Horizon's Edge floating peacefully in core space, its primitive design a stark contrast to the advanced civilizations surrounding it. Fellow counselors, Zethrin began, his voice carrying across the chamber through quantum resonance fields, we face an unprecedented breach of security. A Classification 7 species has not only penetrated the Nexus barrier, but has done so using methods our best scientists cannot fully explain. High Architect Valon, a being of pure geometric thought patterns, manifested a response that appeared as shifting mathematical equations in the air. The implications are severe. If one primitive species can breach our defenses, others may follow. The careful order we have maintained for millennia could collapse. From the shadows of the chamber, a Veil Lord named Whisper of Endings spoke in frequencies that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind. Perhaps the greater concern is not how they breached our defenses, but why they chose to do so. Our intelligence on the human species suggests they are driven by curiosity rather than conquest. This may not be an invasion. The debate that followed revealed deep fractures in the galactic power structure that had been hidden for centuries. Some species, like the Crystal Collective, demanded immediate military action to contain the human threat. Others, led by the ancient Gardner Collective, argued for a more measured response. But underlying all their arguments was a fear none of them wanted to acknowledge, that their carefully maintained superiority might not be as absolute as they had believed. Dr. Marcus Chen's revolutionary discovery. Aboard the Horizon's Edge, Dr. Marcus Chen was having the scientific discovery of several lifetimes. The quantum tunneling technology that had allowed them to breach the barrier had revealed something extraordinary about the nature of space-time itself. As he worked frantically in the ship's modified laboratory, surrounded by jury-rigged equipment and displays showing impossible readings, he realized that humanity's approach to physics might be fundamentally different from the rest of the galaxy. "Captain," Marcus called out, his voice trembling with excitement, "you need to see this immediately." Elena hurried to the science lab, where Marcus had connected their tunneling array to the ship's main sensors. The display showed a three-dimensional map of local space, but it wasn't like any star chart she had ever seen. Instead of showing the positions of planets and stars, it revealed the underlying quantum structure of reality itself, a web of energy connections that linked every point in space to every other point. "What am I looking at?" Elena asked, though part of her already understood. "The Galactic Transportation Network," Marcus replied, barely able to contain his excitement. "Elena, the advanced civilizations don't just travel through space. They travel through folded dimensions, using quantum tunnels that connect distant points instantly. But here's the incredible part. They didn't build this network. It's natural, a fundamental property of space-time that they discovered and learned to use." Elena studied the display more carefully, seeing patterns that reminded her of neural networks or the circulatory system of a vast organism. "And we can access it. Not just access it," Marcus said, his eyes shining with possibility. "I think we can improve it. The aliens use it by following existing pathways, like following roads. But our tunneling technology doesn't just follow the paths. It can create new ones, forge shortcuts that don't exist in nature." The implications were staggering. If Marcus was right, humanity had accidentally discovered a way to travel through space that was not only different from but potentially superior to the methods used by civilizations thousands of years more advanced. They hadn't just broken through one barrier. They had potentially revolutionized galactic transportation itself. Unexpected allies. Ambassador Kythera's ship had remained near the horizon's edge throughout the first day after the breach, serving as an unofficial mediator between the humans and the increasingly agitated military fleets surrounding them. But Kythera wasn't the only one interested in the newcomers. As Elena was reviewing Marcus's latest discoveries, Sarah announced that they were receiving a communication request from an unexpected source. "Captain, there's a ship approaching that's not showing up on any of the military registries. The design is unique." The vessel that appeared on their screens looked like it had been grown rather than built. Its organic curves and flowing lines suggested a technology based on biological principles rather than mechanical engineering. When the communication channel opened, the being that appeared was equally unusual, humanoid in basic shape, but with features that seemed to shift and flow like living water. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Horizon's Edge," the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that spoke of vast depths and ancient currents. "I am flow singer Narita of the Deep Current Collective. We are, how do you say, the outcasts of the core civilizations." Elena leaned forward, intrigued. "Outcasts? Why?" Narita's fluid features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. "Because we ask the same questions you do. Why should advancement be measured by age rather than innovation? Why should wisdom be equated with rigid thinking? Why should the young be prevented from contributing to the galactic community?" Over the next few hours, Elena learned about a hidden network of species within the core civilizations, younger races that had achieved advanced technology, but were still considered junior partners by the ancient powers. The Deep Current Collective, the Singing Crystals of Andromeda, the Forge Masters of the Outer Rim, all civilizations that had chafed under the restrictive hierarchy maintained by the oldest species. "Your breach of the barrier has given us hope," Narita explained. "For centuries, we have been told that there are right ways and wrong ways to approach galactic citizenship. You have shown that there may be entirely new ways we never considered." Jake, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "It sounds like you're talking about a revolution." Nerita's flowing features stilled for a moment before reshaping into an expression of profound seriousness. Perhaps we are, Commander Morrison. The question is whether your species has the courage to help us change a system that has grown stagnant with age. The real enemy revealed. The answer to that question came sooner than anyone expected. 3 days after the breach, as various alien fleets continued their tense standoff around the human ship, the long-range sensors detected something that made every civilization in the core go silent with terror. Elena was in a strategy meeting with her senior officers and the alien ambassadors who had joined them when the alerts began sounding. Sarah's face went pale as she read the sensor data. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic edge. Multiple contacts, moving faster than anything in our databases." The main screen lit up with a display that chilled everyone to the bone. Emerging from the darkness between galaxies came ships, if they could be called ships, that seemed to be made of living shadow. They absorbed light rather than reflecting it, creating voids in space that hurt to look at directly. Where they passed, stars dimmed and went dark, as if the very presence of these vessels drained the life from everything around them. Ambassador Kythera's wooden features grew rigid with ancient fear. The Devourers. They have sensed the barrier breach. What are Devourers? Elena demanded, though part of her already dreaded the answer. The reason the Nexus barrier was truly built, Kythera replied gravely, not to contain young species, but to hide the core civilizations from entities that feed on organized energy, life, technology, consciousness itself. They are drawn to large concentrations of advanced technology like moths to flame. Flo Singer Nerita's liquid form rippled with distress. The barrier has hidden us for centuries. But now that it has been breached, they know we are here. The ancient wars that nearly destroyed the galaxy are about to begin again. Elena looked around at her crew and their new alien allies, seeing fear in every face. But she also saw something else. Determination. The same human stubbornness that had driven them to breach an impossible barrier in the first place. "How do you fight them?" she asked. "You don't." Executor Zethran's voice came over the communication channel as his fleet finally arrived in the area. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been desperation. For 5 centuries, the combined might of the core civilizations has been unable to defeat them. We can only hide and hope they pass us by. Elena studied the tactical display showing the approaching Shadow Fleet. They were vast, ancient, and terrifyingly alien. By every measure of logic and military strategy, they were unbeatable, which she realized with the characteristic human response to impossible odds, just meant that conventional logic and military strategy weren't going to be enough. "Dr. Chen," she called to Marcus, who was frantically analyzing the energy signatures of the approaching ships. "Tell me you have good news." Marcus looked up from his displays, his face showing a mixture of terror and excitement that Elena had learned to recognize as the expression of a human scientist who had just realized something important. "Captain, I think I know why they're called Devourers. They don't just feed on energy. They feed on organized patterns of energy. Life, consciousness, technology. All things that create order from chaos." "And?" Elena prompted. "And our quantum tunneling technology doesn't create order," Marcus said, his voice rising with excitement. "It creates controlled chaos. It breaks down organized patterns and rebuilds them in ways that shouldn't be possible according to conventional physics. If I'm right, we might be the first species in galactic history that's immune to their feeding process." Human leadership emerges. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when humanity truly announced itself to the galaxy. As the Devourer fleet approached and panic spread through the core civilizations, Elena made a decision that seemed insane to every advanced species watching. Instead of running or hiding, she ordered the horizon's edge to move directly toward the approaching enemy. "Captain," Jake said quietly, his hand resting on her shoulder, "that's a really big fleet of galaxy-ending monsters." "Yes, it is," Elena replied calmly. "And they're expecting us to run, hide, or try to fight them conventionally. Time to show them what humans do when everyone says something is impossible. The alien ships that had been surrounding them watched in amazement as the small human vessel accelerated toward certain destruction. But Elena wasn't planning to fight the Devourers with conventional weapons. She was planning to do something that no civilization in galactic history had ever attempted. She was going to communicate with them. "Marcus, can you modify the quantum tunneling array to create a communication pulse instead of a transportation field?" Marcus stared at her as if she had just suggested having tea with a black hole. "Captain, even if I could do that, trying to communicate with Devourers is like trying to have a conversation with entropy itself." "Then we better hope human stubbornness is stronger than entropy," Elena replied with a grin that had gotten her in trouble with superior officers throughout her career. For the next 6 hours, as the Devourer fleet drew closer and alien civilizations across the core prepared for the end of organized life in the galaxy, the crew of the Horizon's Edge performed another miracle of human ingenuity. Working with their new allies from the outcast species, they built a communication device that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. When Elena finally activated the device, the effect was immediate and terrifying. The Devourer fleet stopped its advance, and for the first time in recorded galactic history, one of the shadow ships responded to a communication attempt. The voice that came through their speakers was like the sound of stars dying. Ancient, vast, and filled with a hunger that had consumed galaxies. But it was recognizably intelligent, and more importantly, it was curious about these strange new beings who approached without fear. "Small builders of chaos patterns," the voice said, each word seeming to leach warmth from the ship's atmosphere. "You are unlike the ordered ones who hide behind barriers. What are you?" Elena stepped forward, representing not just humanity, but all the young species of the galaxy who had been told they weren't ready for the responsibilities of advanced civilization. "We are humans. We are explorers, builders, dreamers. We turn chaos into order and order into something better. And we're here to talk." The new galactic order. What followed was the most important diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. For 3 days, Elena and her crew served as mediators between the Devourers and the core civilizations, helping both sides understand that the ancient conflict had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The Devourers weren't destroyers of life. They were recyclers of stagnant energy, clearing away civilizations that had become too rigid and ordered to continue growing. The core species had mistaken this natural process for malicious destruction, building barriers and weapons to fight against something that was actually trying to help the galaxy evolve. But humans, with their unique combination of order and chaos, offered a third option. They could serve as bridges between the ancient Devourers and the younger civilizations, helping both sides find new ways to coexist and grow. The agreement that emerged from these negotiations reshaped galactic civilization forever. The Nexus barrier was modified rather than destroyed, becoming a filter that allowed worthy species to pass through based on their contributions rather than their age. The core civilizations agreed to share their knowledge more freely, while the Devourers took on the role of galactic gardeners, helping stagnant civilizations renew themselves instead of simply consuming them. And at the center of it all were the humans, no longer classified as primitive, but recognized as essential catalysts for galactic evolution. Their ship, the